It's the day after Independence Day, and I hope you had a good time. I hope you don't suffer from a hangover or from some kind of ringing in your ears because of the loud noise of the fireworks. And I hope you're ready to once again get more empowered and learn more about also the workings of the mind, especially those parts of our mind we are not necessarily paying attention to. Well, they make us often feel rather independent and trapped, and it doesn't have to be this way. So, Empowerment Radio is always about finding solutions that make us feel ultimately more not only in control of our lives or of our mind and our emotions, but also more in harmony with all of it, especially in harmony with ourselves. Now, some people ask me, so how do you pick the shows? What is really the topics? Where do they come from? How do you come up with it? And I have to admit, it happens kind of organically, or you could say randomly, but it happens in a way that I get, somehow inspired or triggered by something that happens in my life. And so for this show, it was exactly the same, because there was a participant of one of the telesummits I was speaking at who wrote me an email. And she was asking about whether the meditation, it was an integration process that I introduced there, whether this also would work for her challenge, which is OCD, obsessive-compulsive disorder. Now, her story was that she was moving along in life and everything seems to be hunky-dory, and one day she woke up, she felt somehow, not really depressed, but numb. She felt kind of disconnected from it all, and almost like a gray cloud was over her mind, over her life. And in the course of that day, she then had all of a sudden a so-called harmful thought. A harmful thought is a thought that may be about harming someone that you care about, someone you're with, someone that you would never really want to hurt, but all of a sudden that thought that you would take a knife and put it to their throat, or maybe push them off the roof, or something that's really bizarre, that feels frightening, that feels like, oh my God, what happened here? That's exactly what happened to her. So she felt that there was something happening in her mind that she didn't have control over, and she wondered if she's going crazy. And that depressed her. She always saw herself as a very powerful and positive person who goes out of bed with a spring in her step, and then that. So she went to the doctors, and the allopathic medicine doctor said, well, you probably have some imbalance in your brain chemistry. Your serotonin levels are probably off, so let's give you some antidepressants. Well, the more naturopathic oriented doctor said, well, I think we're going to do a hair analysis and check on your adrenals. And well, lo and behold, this person found out that she had adrenal fatigue. And adrenal fatigue is a sign of prolonged and chronic stress. And then she went to a therapist, and the therapist say, well, these unwanted thoughts that are recurring, they're coming up totally out of the blue, those are OCD thoughts, and there's really nothing that we know about where they are coming from. They are just showing up, and there is just all we can do, basically doing certain kind of exposure therapy and so on, to eventually overcome them. And that was a moment when I thought, like, hold on. So is that really true that our mind just randomly brings up thoughts or patterns and behaviors that ultimately make us feel frightened, that make us feel trapped, that make us feel that, we are going crazy? Is that really just our mind misfiring? Or is there something deeper to that? So I emailed her and asked her a bit, about her story. And from what I read between the lines, I had the sense that there was more going on than just waking up one day and all of this started. There may have been some anything else happening. Now, what happened with her was that she then told me that she had pretty much all her life felt that she had to be in charge, in control, that she was the doer, she was impatient, she felt like she had to be the one that keeps things going, partially because her childhood was rather traumatic. She had parents that divorced, she lost a half-brother who was taken by the father and she loved him dearly, and some really just chaotic events that made her feel she had to really somehow almost like micromanage her life. Right before she was feeling this OCD, she started a new job. And that was the most demanding job she ever had. It was stressful, long hours, and that feeling it was never really good enough. She really could never succeed. So that made her feel already out of control. Then, coinciding with that was that she moved in with her boyfriend, who turned out to be a little bit different than she thought he was, which was that he was kind of stressed out with his own job, feeling more negative, feeling more depressed, and that then was projected on her, and that made her more, feeling that she had to walk on eggshells. So all of this coinciding together just really made her feel, maybe for the first time in her life, completely out of control. And this is why I believe the OCD was coming up. And this is why OCD often is just a pattern, a compensatory mechanism for an anxious mind that feels out of control. Or you could also call it is basically, the phobia to powerlessness, the phobia of powerlessness, the fear of, I don't really know how to handle my life, so I'm focusing on something I can handle. And we get more into this because it really gets interesting when you're looking at the different forms of OCD and then you're interpreting them a little bit into, okay, what does it actually mean here? And where could the mind come up with such a pattern? Now, if you are thinking OCD, let's turn off the radio or change the channel because I don't really have it. Hold on, because I believe OCD, even though statistically 1 in 40 people, which is pretty high in the US, are struggling with OCD, I believe the actual number is much higher. And you can just test yourself. Now, how comfortable, for example, do you feel when someone would tell you, let's not check your phone for a whole day? Or, for example, not checking your emails or your messages before you go to bed. Or if you're a news junkie, how often do you look and watch what breaking things are happening outside in the world? And how often do you feel like when your kids are, out and about, do you look at, have they called? Where are they? Look at the watch. How many minutes are gone? These kind of patterns can also develop easily into an obsessive-compulsive disorder. Now, I don't like the word disorder because it sounds disorderly and it sounds like there is something wrong with us, but ultimately it's simply a behavior, a pattern that we need to look a little bit closer at. Now, the classic ones that people would say, yeah, that's definitely the OCD pattern, would be the ones where you, let's say, for example, have the need to have every book or every tool neatly in order. And you cannot really stand if anything is out of order. Or you have that feeling that you always have to drive home the exact same way. Or you feel like you have to wash your hands 15 times. Even though you washed it already once and that should be enough. No, it's not enough. You have to wash them again. Or some people feel really trapped when it comes to leaving the house. They have to check on the iron, not 1 time, but 10 times. They are locking the door, and then they are looking again. Is it locked? And then they unlock it, and they lock it again, and it just keeps on going. And I had clients, it sometimes took them 30 minutes to leave the house. And it is a little bit like, the needle in the record, in the kind of old-fashioned vinyl record, stuck and not moving. and you just play the same pattern, the same song, the same little segment over and over again, and there is no escape, there is no feeling of getting out. And that's what makes OCD so debilitating and what makes it so hard for people to cope with and deal with, because they just feel trapped. Now, today's show is really about highlighting more what OCD actually means, where it comes from, what the subconscious has to do with it, how can we interpret it more as maybe a message rather than a misery, and how can we turn it around, how can we learn from the OCD, understanding also what are the root causes we have to address, then once we address them, what can we specifically do, what steps to take to outgrow these behaviors. Now, I have been, of course, working with people with anxiety for 15 plus years, and many of my clients have been dealing with OCD. But OCD is also something dear to my heart because I had been struggling with it myself. And after the break, I'll tell you a little bit more about my story and how I learned and what I learned from the OCD. So stay tuned. We will be right back.